Oh, we'll have to do that. We'll definitely have to get into that. So, hey, good morning and welcome to After Action Studios. We're very lucky today that we have Shawn and Natasha from Caregivers on the Homefront here. So, thank you so much for coming in today. I greatly appreciate
It's really nice to see you guys.
We're happy to be here and to see you too.
it.
I think I know one of your cohorts. Her last name is Moyette or
Moyers.
Moyers. Yes,
Yes.
Moyers. I was way off.
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I know Matt.
Oh.
We hung out at War Horses for Veterans.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I wondered who had the War Horses sticker out in the parking lot on their car.
Yeah, I used to work over there.
Okay.
Good
All
times.
right.
Yeah.
We've been out there before
Yeah.
with our caregivers.
I know.
For sure.
It's all connected in here. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Oh,
what we're
yeah.
trying to do with the network is,
For
hey,
sure.
how do we connect everybody to get in here? So, yeah, it's always a good thing. But yeah, that's what we're here to talk about today. We got our other, our BSO series podcast of what we're doing, where we're just trying to introduce the different veteran service organizations that are around Kansas City, and really kind of get you more knowledgeable on what are out there. So we can kind of segue into that and, let you guys kind of introduce yourselves and how you kind of got here and talk a little bit about caregivers. But yeah, if you guys want to start off with your guys' name, what you guys, your roles at, caregivers and go from there.
Okay. Well, my name is Shawn Moore, and Caregivers on the Homefront came to fruition in 2017 when I pretty much was unable to find resources in the Kansas City area for veteran and military caregivers. And I, at the time, was a police officer for Kansas City and had been for almost 13 years at the time, and kind of used our connections through some of my husband's interest in the veteran landscape and kind of went from there. We started a support group first, and then I still saw a gap in the fact that many organizations were not taking care of all eras of veteran family members. So that is when I had a bright idea one morning while I was getting ready for work. No kidding, I was in the shower and hear this little voice say, "You should start a nonprofit." And I'm like, "I'm a cop. I've never done that. What are you talking about?" And although my husband had started a nonprofit when he was in the WTU to bring a memorial to Hunter Army Airfield. So I knew he could do the paperwork. I knew I was golden there. I just needed to do the footwork. And like you said, when you mentioned Rachel Moyer's name, she was pretty much my partner in crime at the time. And
She's a beast.
yeah, we took it and ran with it and started having support groups. One of the big things that I saw also a gap in caregiver services. I had been to a couple of national caregiver retreats, which were wonderful, but I looked at them as a time to get away for a weekend, and I didn't get much back except for maybe my nails done and a great
Oh.
massage, which is needed.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
This is what you need.
Yeah, for
I'm telling
sure.
you, it's needed. But when you get back home, you're facing the same stuff that you left with shiny nails and your back feels good for a little bit,
Yeah.
right? So that doesn't sustain a caregiver on this journey of taking care of a wounded or ill veteran.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make things different. And our restorative weekend that we have aims at the caregiver's mental health and wellness. We don't hardly talk about the veteran. It is not about the veteran for the weekend. It is everything that you've been stuffing for many years, and it may not even have anything to do with your veteran. We actually have a lot of female veterans come in that
Mhm.
are also taking care of their veterans, and they never talk about their own veteran service or their military service. So some things come out that they've never really gotten to talk about. So before I go into that so much, let me introduce Natasha and let her talk. Natasha and I met while we were going to Park University to get our master's degree in social work, and we kind of hit it off with when we started talking about our stories of taking care of veterans.
Right. So, yes, my name is Natasha Swayze. I never considered myself as a caregiver. I had no idea even what that meant. I saw Shawn present at Park University on Caregivers on the Homefront and shared her story. And I was sitting in the audience and I thought, oh my gosh, that is a lot of who I am. And I had no idea. I was actually going through a divorce at the time with the person who I would consider who I was a caregiver for. But it was, I had to learn how to do that role now as someone divorced from that person because we have kids in common.
Yeah.
So that role looks different than someone who would be a caregiver for someone in their home, but still trying to navigate that role and explain to my kids, different things that go on with a veteran when they suffer from PTSD or a TBI or any of those things. So, Shawn, the program director role came up, and we were sitting at breakfast, and she said, "Hey, are you interested in doing this?" And I thought I didn't have a job yet lined up for school and or after school, and I thought, I guess so. I don't, what's that mean? What's that entail? And we hit the ground running together, and it's been great. And right now we're really trying to navigate serving our caregivers virtually with everything, the pandemic and everything.
sure.
So that's really my concentration right now is how do we reach out to our caregivers and support them during this pandemic?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing. I think there's a couple of common themes that come out of here because, that's something through my experience of, starting a nonprofit. And I've been doing this for 10 years now, helping out veterans. There's a lot of populations within the veteran side that often get forget about. And one of those big ones are the caregivers that are going out through there. That's one really big thing that I've noticed was, it's kind of what we did with After Action Network. There wasn't a resource for the resources. So how can we help those nonprofits out there? But the other thing that I saw too was who's out there really kind of helping the caregivers. That's a big thing. It's very easy for your body just to, call it quits relatively quickly. I'm 34 and, overweight, my foot's all messed up, PTS and all that other type of stuff going through there. And for a while, it's like, oh, I'm fine. I'm going through there. And then it just started going drastically downhill to where it's like, okay, well, I need to really start taking care of myself on it. But what about those that need help getting taken care of? That's a very kind of difficult thing of what's going through. And so that's where I'm really kind of curious about this and really kind of the roles that you guys take and really kind of understanding what it means to be a caregiver. Because this is something I would love for you guys to talk about a little bit more because people don't realize they're caregivers. That's a big thing that I've noticed as well, too, that, oh, I'm dating a veteran and you're doing a lot more to help them out because you care and you love them and you do all that, but you really don't realize that
I never thought about it that way.
Oh, yeah, that you actually are being a caregiver. And, a lot of times that makes it very difficult on a relationship because, not that saying that it's toxic, but it can be definitely codependent and it can get dependent on there. And so I can definitely see where there can be marital issues. I can see where there can be other issues of going through there. So if you're not really taking care of yourself as a caregiver, how are you going to be able to take care of that veteran that you care about and go through there? So
You have hit the nail on the head with everything that you just said. First, let's go into the identity of being a caregiver and what that
Absolutely.
looks like, right? Because as many of the caregivers are females, but there are many male caregivers. But work with me here for a minute in that as a female, we are basically born and brought up to take care of people, right? So then we enter this role, we get married, we're a spouse, and what do we do for our loved one? We take care of them. And so when the veteran becomes injured or ill from military service, we just do it.
Yeah.
yeah.
You don't think about it.
I mean, that's what we did in the military. You just do it, and especially if you're married while you're in there, they're deployed. Hey, you just got to do what you got to do. I mean,
Yes.
that's a big thing. I mean, you're on your own little mini deployment of being at home and taking care of the kids, taking care of the house while they're gone.
That's got to be
Often,
the.
we're there.
I've thought about this a lot because I was married when I was in, and so many things can go wrong. So many things, and that amount of stress of not knowing, that's torture.
It's huge. And, as a police officer, I get that too, right?
Yeah.
When you're leaving home every day and your family is wondering if you're going to come back, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
That crosses over. And I think that the big thing is when, you get that knock on the door or that phone call saying your loved one has been injured, and you need to fly to Germany, you're in go mode then, right? And you do not think about anything except for putting your foot in front of the other and getting to where your loved one is. So you have started the process of unconsciously becoming this caregiver.
Yeah.
But you believe you're just the spouse, you're just the mom or dad, you're going to take care of them.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and that's the big thing that I've seen in the past as well too is you don't realize you're starting another job. There's a point in time where it becomes that it's no longer your spouse. I mean, yes, they are your spouse, but no longer you have those defined roles. And now that role reverts into something of you being a caregiver, you basically being a nurse for what you need. That puts a lot of pressure on you as the person that needs to go in there and take care of that person. So I can definitely see why it's very necessary. And that's something that we don't talk about, which I find very, very weird that we don't support those more. I know there's some things that are trying to change in the government when it comes to that, because like 70% of spouses are unemployed that are doing it. It's like crazy statistics, but it goes, once again, those are kind of those things that just fall off the wagon when it comes down to veterans. I mean, that's why I'm a big advocate for women veterans and minority veterans, but also caregivers that are going through there because they don't understand, or, these officials or government politicians, they don't understand the full scope of what that really kind of goes through, because your whole entire relationship changes. Your whole entire life changes when it comes down to that, to where it's not that you have these warm, fuzzy memories of, before the injury or whatever it's going through. And now you're sitting there of like, okay, now I really got to take care of this person. And that might make your feelings change, quite a bit, instead of it just being, hey, I'm here for the love, but now I'm feeling like I'm got to do this or whatever that is. I mean, if that makes sense. I mean, that's where I can see it just having quite a bit of issues when it comes down to, post-military career. I mean, it goes through that whole dynamic of, hey, he was the breadwinner or she was the breadwinner going through there. Now you come back home and now you got to be the breadwinner and take care of somebody.
Yes, and I mean, you're exactly right. So in this space of caregiving, one of the things that we talk about all the time, and one of the main reasons we started Caregivers on the Home Front, was to support these caregivers, these spouses, moms, dads, sisters, brothers, friends that are taking care of veterans, is because caregiving is they take that on as their whole entire identity, right? Many have to quit their jobs, quit careers that they love. I am not a police officer anymore. It was really hard for me to be on a call for service and get a phone call from my husband going, I need you home now, because of suicidality issues. And
Yeah.
then looking, at, the officers around me or my sergeant going, yeah, I really need to go right now. And in that job for me, that wasn't feasible. So
Even
it
putting it
really,
in the context of right now, what we're going through right now as a
Yes.
country, it's got to be tenfold.
I can tell you right now, I'm glad I'm not on the street right now. It would be
Oh.
a very difficult time. I've got friends, very close friends that are still out there. But, you know, when I got to the point, the last couple of years of being an officer, I was taking off the full maximum time, 3 months of FMLA that I could take each year, because I was home, making sure he was safe, navigating triggers for him, navigating the VA and the appointments for him, making sure meds were ordered, making sure they were taken properly.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of things that caregiver or spouses or partners end up doing that they don't realize are caregiving duties. That's not a quote wifely duty. I'm telling you, I did not sign up to make sure my husband doesn't attempt suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a lot of my daily struggle is he okay today? Are we going to make it through today? Is he going to make it through today? And when you talk about relationships, it is in research. So this should not be our politicians, our policymakers, our leaders should not be caught off guard that relationships break down in veteran couples, that there is a high rate of suicidality and suicides, and a high rate of veteran homelessness. Well, you have the research right in front of you that states that if someone has PTSD and they're in a relationship, that relationship has some major, major obstacles to overcome. Major.
You just hit me with a stroke of hindsight reality because I came back and I was not the same guy. We were young, real young, stupid, and I was a comet of rage. It was,
I know that one.
and she found somebody else while I was gone. It happens statistically, and I found that out. One of my best friends in the Army. So that rage and that murderous craziness went through, took everything from me. So I'm about to ETS or PCS to the guard rather. I lost my wife, lost my house, just got back from Iraq. Holy shit. It's like I was definitely here. Definitely.
Huge.
And to think about now, the path from then to now, it's a lot. And I had a lot of help though, a community. I didn't have a spouse, but I had the community. I was lucky for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the big thing is when you get out, you lose that identity of who you were when you were in the military. And so when you have to come back and all of a sudden you can't really take care of your own self, there's a lot of guilt and a lot of shame that goes into that as a veteran. I mean, I completely understand that because when I got out, and especially after I got hurt, there was so much guilt and shame that I have. It wasn't my fault that I got hurt. You know, that was definitely in the military. But did I bear that cross? Absolutely. You know, I put that monkey on my back and carried that around for a long time before I finally come to the understanding that, hey, it's okay to do this. And, you know, for me, you know, I had a girlfriend of 9 years of doing that. And then, you know, looking in retrospect, is like, man, how much did I really put on her from, you know,
We put everything on them, dude.
Oh yeah,
We
no,
did.
absolutely, yeah. I can see that. I was like, oh god, like you know, looking back at it, and I was like, Jesus, man, I was a fucking wreck.
Natasha, what'd you learn from all this?
No, so when we brought up PTSD and all these different things, I think that's really where I like to advocate is because when we hear caregiver, we think of someone caring for someone who has physical wounds.
Yeah.
Lots of times I think the unseen wounds and the mental wounds, there's so much that goes into caring for someone. And so lots of times, even for myself, when I heard caregiver, I thought, even with Shawn, I thought, oh my gosh, you know, is her husband missing a limb but there's caregiving. I mean, it's a whole realm of making sure someone has their medication, is taking it properly, encourage them to go to therapy, researching different therapies and options for them. It doesn't stop. And even with me, with my ex-husband, I still do that because I want him to be the best person he can, no matter what, but especially because we have kids together. So still continuing that role. And I think it's something that's forgotten a lot.
No, absolutely. And that's the big thing that I've come to realize too was, because when I heard caregiver before all this, I always thought it was going to be somebody that was bedridden and, kind of needed all this other, special attention that's going through there. And then I met Shawn a few years ago and we started talking more about this. And I'm like, oh, wow, no, that's a whole different subset of that's a small fraction of what caregivers actually is. And it's really a lot of the mental health aspects that of coming back from service and kind of goes back to that whole thing of, you were in the military, you were hot shit, you did whatever else, and you come back and then all of a sudden
You
you're
ain't
you're
nothing.
you're a mess, and you don't have those structures, you don't have that support like you did in the military. And now you kind of come back to it. It's like, okay, well, now I feel worthless. Now I feel whatever. But at the same time, that energy can actually be, to me, be put back up onto the caregiver. That's a lot of pressure to be able to do that. And so, I mean, that's great on you guys for what you do and bringing awareness to it, because there really isn't not enough awareness, because this goes in hand with veteran suicides, with PTS. But how does that affect the family? How does that affect, my relationship with my mom? I mean, my mom's been a huge supporter of mine. She understands that what I go through and everything else. And so I can see an aspect of her helping me out and her doing that, but also, I think there needs to be more education for caregivers that when they get into it of, hey, this is really kind of what you're stepping into. And there's a point in time where caregivers too, they need to step away. And if it's something that you need to just really step away going through that and still be supportive like you are with your ex, I can definitely see how that goes, because that love there, but that's a lot of pressure on doing that. And I don't see that much from the VA, which, I wish it would be, but it's not, it's just, I know Voc Rehab does stuff with, helping veterans out. That's actually one of my experience of learning about caregiving was going through Voc Rehab. And I was like, well, I want to get this, job. I want to be an artist. And they're like, no, off your skills assessment test, you can only be a security guard or data entry clerk. And I was like, what do you really do here? Like, it just seems like you guys are kind of just checking boxes. And like, honestly, we're here more for like building wheelchair ramps and all this. Like, we only help veterans just find jobs here and there. It's like, damn, like, okay, well, we need to figure this out a little bit more. But yeah.
Yeah, I think you've hit on some really great points too, in that, so um, it is shameful, right? And you do feel shame. You are guilty that for my husband. So we weren't together when he was in the military. We met as he was being medically discharged, and I remember on our first date, he's like, "I've got PTSD. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I live with my parents." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Winner, chicken dinner.
Wow. I'm like, I'm in. I can fix all this shit, right? Seriously, as a woman, isn't that what we think we can do? We can fix all this shit and everything's going to be great. But I can tell you about 3 weeks into dating him, when I found myself over at his parents' house where he lived, trying to talk him out of a closet because he was having a flashback and he thought he was being deployed and he couldn't find any of his gear. And of course, it's all packed up because, he's not in anymore. And as a girlfriend, I'm like, I don't have a clue what to do. What I was saying to him wasn't clicking. And immediately I'm like, all right, well, let me put my police officer hat on here. And because I've gone on calls with veterans, I'm like, okay, what would I do? And so funny thing, as I put that police officer hat on, I'm like, I call EMS. I'm gonna get an ambulance here. Like, I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, we got it.
Crazy thing. I mean, I was able to, after I put that kind of hat on and look at it in a different angle, which right there says, you are looking at things not as a girlfriend, not as a spouse, not as a mom or dad, for your loved one. You really have to step out. You are in a different role. And being in those roles does affect your relationships. And then fast forward a little bit, my husband did have an attempt in 2017. And I'm telling you, our whole entire relationship has changed since then. And I'm not going to tell you and sit here and blow smoke up your heinies that it's been for the best. And I will tell you why. It's because he got all the support in the world, right? Who do I immediately call? Where does he go? He goes to the VA. I get calls from the VA telling me to make sure that I took everything out of the house that he could use to attempt again. I'm like, is that reality?
That seems
I'm
like
like, for one, you're putting all this on me.
Yep.
yes.
I'm a spouse. And at the time I was still an officer, and I'm like, look, I don't control our finances. He can go out and buy whatever he wants
Oh, yeah.
and do whatever he wants, but you're putting on me this reality of I have to keep my husband safe because you're not going to do it. Right? That's how I felt. So I felt extremely alone in this caregiving. Now I gotta keep my husband safe from attempting suicide again. And this was not I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it was a major attempt, and he's lucky to be alive today. So when you put things like that on these family members, you've got to take care of the family members then, right? You
Yes,
have to
passing the
take
buck.
care of them. And if you want us to succeed as a family, then it's not only about getting that veteran mental health care and getting them inpatient support. It is about getting mental health care for the whole entire family unit. And we know the VA doesn't do that in most places. Some will do couples therapy at the VA. My husband and I have been down that route. It didn't work well. We didn't finish. I got extremely upset with the therapist when she basically told me that his attempt was my fault.
Oh, wow.
Shit.
Not kidding you. And I'm like, okay, not doing this again. But that is where organizations have got to come in and step up to the plate. When they say we're supporting veterans, add family members to it.
Oh, absolutely.
I got a question
Period.
for you. So, is it? I know it's probably way down the road, but for the funding of it, so military, we have to transition out. It used to be horrible. Now it's gotten better, from what I hear. I really think it should be like if your spouse has been in for any type of time in this combat, it should be a 2-year period, probably more, of transitioning and learning together. But I don't think it should be very army-fied. I mean, if the more you can get them out of it.
Well, and that's a big thing that I talk with politicians about all the time is there needs to be more of a structure set into place for the family unit and not just the veteran. Because when you go through your transition assistance program, it's all about, hey, what's the veteran going to do when they set up their lives and going back through there? But at the same time, that veteran gets out, and, statistically, the first year out of service is the most critical time for veterans. And that's where a lot of times veterans, that's when they start screwing up because they have this newfound freedom. They start drinking a lot more. Oh, I don't have to go to PT. I don't have to do this. I don't have to report to anything. And you start really developing out those bad habits. And it's easy to do that because, hey, if you saved up money when you got out, or you're still getting your money from being on terminal leave or whatever that may be.
Gotcha.
Yeah, going through there. And, because a lot of times, too, people don't have shit set up. Like, when I got out, I had no idea where I was going to live when I got out. I really didn't. And it was just like, okay, well, I'll just, go live with my brother and then move back to Kansas City and live with my mom, and I'll figure it out from there. And so that's where a lot of things I think that I see is that it's just not really kind of set into place for the families. Yeah, it's there for the veteran, but the veteran, when they get out, and all of a sudden they have to start thinking about, well, I got to pay bills, and that's the big thing right there. There's another podcast that I listened to that a lot of issues that come up with veterans are because of that fact. I got to pay bills. It's not doing what you love. It's not finding new purpose. It's not that. I got to take care of my family. Well, okay, well, now you really got to take care of your family. You're getting some dead-end job that you really don't like, but hey, I got to pay the bills and put food on the table. Well, now start compounding that with a physical injury, a mental injury, and then it quickly deteriorates relatively quickly. And now that husband or wife is putting on a new hat or new role as basically a social worker within your own family on how to do things, and that's a big thing. And so going back from your story with your husband and his attempt, like, when was it that you put on that social work hat? Because you both just recently graduated. So, I mean, congratulations on that too.
Thank you.
Congrats.
We've it's been a fun ride the last year with being in school. But so I think one of the things that played into the day of his attempt was that I was an officer. And, you know, we had been in therapy together the day before. He had been asked if he was suicidal. He stated no. We were getting ready to go on a family military retreat the next day. He had we weren't together. I actually thought he was in a really safe place for that day, one of those days that I could just kind of lean back, go into work. I'm not going to have to worry because he's around some other people and he's going to be good to go today. Well, he had a really bad trigger. And this is where I believe that our caregivers and our family members and veterans, so this comes back on veterans, you have got to let your loved one in. You have to. I know it's difficult, and I know you think that you are protecting your loved one, but if we don't know, we don't know. And I believe with my husband and I, because I was a police officer and had seen some yucky stuff, we were able to share some things because he didn't think that it was going to be a huge burden if he put some things on me because I had seen some stuff too. But with that being said, I knew him and I knew his patterns. And when I text him and he didn't text me back, yes, very big red flag. And then when it got lunchtime, when I knew he would be available and he wasn't answering my phone call, I knew that something was terribly wrong. I mean, terribly wrong. And it's funny because I had something, I was leaving work early, but I had to go meet my daughters. And I was in with them for about 45 minutes. And when I got back out and he still had not reached out to me, my gut kind of dropped. I can remember exactly where I was that day and how I felt and how the sun was on my forehead. I'm not kidding you. And so this is just telling you how much a family member remembers in traumatic incidences and crisis. But at that minute, for whatever reason, I knew he wasn't home. That didn't even come to my mind. My first thought was, how am I going to find him? And to do that, I stepped back into that police officer role. And I'm going to tell you, I hated doing that in my own home, right?
Yeah.
I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I'm not a police officer at home. So granted, it afforded me the opportunity to compartmentalize really well.
Yeah.
But that's not good as a spouse and a mom. But that knowing my husband, knowing that something was terribly wrong, going with my gut, having someone that I could call that would not go, "Man, are you sure?" Yeah, that person that I called didn't judge me. All he asked me was, "What do you need me to do?" And we need people like that in our courts too. So other veterans.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big, firm believer in veteran courts. So, yeah.
Yes. So, I called him. He asked me where I needed him to go. I had been able, totally different story, but I was able to track all of our phones, and that's how I found him. And when I saw where he was at, I knew that the day was not going to end well. And that's exactly what I told my friend. I'm like, look, this is the deal, and this probably isn't going to end well. And thankfully, because we got there in time, like mere minutes later, we would have been doing a whole different thing. But as a social worker, now afterwards, like after that initial shock and getting him to the hospital, I kind of lucked out because I was an officer at the time. They really let me, and I was not in my jurisdiction, but they all knew I was an officer. They kind of let me control the scene as much as I could, and I was able to ride in the ambulance, and they listened to me. And that's another thing too, caregivers and family members. You know your veteran best.
Yeah.
You know your veteran best. And I knew when the lights and sirens and everybody, as when we respond to a scene, we're all crashing in on the scene, we're running to get there. And that was scaring the shit out of my husband. So I immediately, he has PTSD, you're scaring him, he is not a danger to you. Immediately said that. And And then we kind of went from there. But afterwards, as he's inpatient, right, that's when the social work skills and those skills as a caregiver needs to come out, because you are advocating for your loved one. You are making sure that, do meds really need to be changed? Was it a med thing? Or was it really just not just a trigger, but was it a trigger?
Yep.
And, those are the things that need, my husband couldn't do that. He was in a crisis.
Yeah.
And just like you mentioned, when you're getting out of the military, if you're injured or ill, you're in a crisis. And when you're going through the transition program, you're not remembering any of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where I'm a big believer in a lot of service organizations that are out there, and especially the VA, their crisis management. That's truly all they are, is they wait for you're in crisis and then they come in and step in and do that. And so that's where I'm a big believer in learning what those triggers are beforehand, dealing with the tools they can do it, not just you as a veteran, because as a veteran, yeah, it's very easy to get into that woe is me pity party. Well, you need to, it's bad to say, suck the fuck up, but you need to start learning to develop out tools to where you can start understanding that within yourself and recognizing that, because it's very, very easy and it's a very slippery slope to go down there and just feel bad for yourself.
Well, you can't be afraid of every day. If you have a bad day, getting thrown into L3 psych ward with a rubber toothbrush. That's bullshit too, because that is a huge fear.
Yeah, I had somebody that I had a veteran that did that they went in for a regular medical appointment. They asked for something, and then next day he was locked up for 3 days, and he was like, man, that's the other bad thing that I've come to find out as well too. You say the wrong thing, you're getting locked up. And that's where it's just kind of, and it's funny, the guys that don't really kind of need that, they're like being honest, and then all of a sudden they're in 9 ward and whatever, and they're stuck there for 3 days, and they're like, well, I don't trust saying anything again. And then you get guys that just kind of walk out there, and they you look at the Kansas City VA here. I mean, you had a Marine Corps veteran that literally went to the parking lot, sat on his medical records, and shot himself in the parking lot. I mean, there was a time last year where there was 36 veteran suicides in a 3-month span on veteran properties or on VA properties, which is a huge, huge issue and a huge red flag of what's going through. Because that's where it comes back that I don't think there's enough education on building that tool set of, hey, yeah, you do have issues of what's coming through. Because the fact that I was going to bring up on here as well too, post-traumatic stress can transfer over to another person as well too. Your anxiety, your whatever. Because I remember with my ex, I would be sitting there. Oh yeah, she would kill me. We'd go to a restaurant and I've got to have my back to the wall. I got to look at everybody that's coming in here, and she would would you just look at me for 30 seconds? I'm like, listen, I'm hearing everything that you said, but this is just sensory overload. And so then that puts her on edge. It puts whoever else on edge, and it's just kind of going through there. And that compounds after a while. You just kind of build that up and what's going through. So one, how do you figure out those tools as an individual? And this sounds bad, but not to be a burden on the others, but you need to learn to take care of yourself and know when to ask for help. And that's really kind of the big thing. Just a quick story. I remember talking to, he was the son of a veteran, actually. His father was in Vietnam, and when he was like 10 years old, watched his father shoot himself in their living room going through there. And he's like, I've lived with that for every day of my life, and I could never understand why he did that to himself of what's going through. He would just come home, drink himself to death, and then one day the family was sitting in the living room and he shot himself right there. And so there's that traumatic stress that comes from that. But then especially when it comes down to kids and even spouses, that just them not understanding and not knowing, that's where another educational tool set is coming through is, hey, we need you to understand what they could potentially go through, because, hey, it's, for that first year when you get out, yeah, you seem like it's all gravy. Then after that first year, you're like, oh shit, now things are really starting to settle in. And for me, my post-traumatic stress that would come in, and it's just kind of story like your husband, that he was in a closet, going to that. I have dreams still to this day. I'll wake up and I'm like, where's my rifle? I will freak out for a good hour when I wake up of where's my stuff? Where's this? And I'm like, oh shit, that's not it. And I've been removed for 10 years now, and I still do that. And so I think there's a lot more toolkits that need to be set out there. And I think that comes back to programming as well, too, which that's what I want to kind of dive into a little bit more is what does that program, what does that toolkit look like for you guys? Because I know you've obviously dealt with your own personal experiences. From your personal experiences, you've taken that next step of becoming social workers to really fully understand that, what is it that's going out there that you're trying to educate people on, give them the tool resources, or, really what does that look like for, somebody coming into caregivers?
Um, so I really appreciate that you touched on um, all the organizations that are crisis management. I feel like with Caregivers on the Homefront, we're not crisis management per se, but we do support a lot of caregivers that are in the thick of things and are just have been going through stuff and it building up for years. I think that's one of our goals is to try to find these caregivers before their service member gets back home. We need to start at the beginning and educate and provide them tools and give them resources on almost like what can you expect.
Yeah, it's almost after the fact.
Right.
It's almost too late sometimes. It's like, okay, now we got to go find this tool bag and give it to you there, where that tool bag should just be given to you the day that you get out and say, hey, here you go. Or at least gearing up. Because, to me, what would make sense is that there's actually classes on base that first year when you're getting out. Hey, this is what to expect. This is what's going through. That, to me, it should be mandatory what's going through. Because, God, I know when I was in the Marine Corps, it was like 90% divorce rate that was going through there. It's a mess of what's going through.
Anybody. I think that's with anybody that takes the oath. In any discipline, we got a shit job. It's just how it is. How did you how did you handle it when you were younger in the marriage and seeing all these things?
I didn't even know. Well, he told me I married him after he was 5 years removed from the Marines when I married him. And he told me up front what he, and kind of like Shawn, I thought, well, that's no big deal. Everything's fine. But then, I started seeing holes be put in the wall when he lost his temper or things broken or just all these different symptoms and behaviors from what he was dealing with. But he wouldn't talk to me, so I didn't know what was really going on in his mind. And I think that's important. Shawn touched on that. You have to, the person that, whether it's a parent or your child or a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, you have to share those thoughts with that person because they have to know what's going on. Joey touched on it. It's that stuff rubs off on the caregiver.
For sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I ended up having anxiety because I was always on eggshells wondering, okay, what's going to trigger him to where he's going to throw the coffee table or, cuss out the neighbor or we're in public and something happens. So I was always on guard. I became the person on guard and watching who was around and
you're on duty 24/7.
On duty, yeah.
Right.
And
sign my logbook.
at our kids' football game or baseball games, like, oh God, I hope someone doesn't say something wrong, that's going to trigger them and it's going to be a big blow up. And so just being on guard, that it literally gave me anxiety.
Yeah.
That I've had to deal with.
And you have nobody to be a caregiver for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think lots of times veterans don't understand that can transfer to that person. And it's not to make the veteran feel bad but it's just
energy's transferred.
Science. It
Negative
happens.
energy, positive energy. We're all beacons in some way.
Yeah.
And if you're a dick, everybody knows that feels the same thing.
And then back to, what we do to support our caregivers and the resources we give them. When they come to our restorative weekends, it's not about the veteran that weekend. It's all about them and what skills do they have. And they each take 20 minutes just talking about who they are as a person. And we tell them, leave out the veteran. What are you good at?
Mm-hmm.
What strengths do you have? What strengths do you have that, you can be the best caregiver you can be.
Yeah.
It's all about who they are, because lots of times the caregiver, if something happens to that veteran, the caregiver's lost. Like that role is, they're literally lost. That role is gone, and they don't know what to do with themselves.
It's definitely identity crisis issues that's going
Yes.
through there. I know that from my experience was I didn't know what my identity was when I got out. And that was very easy to just get lost and once again go down that slippery slope. And I think it's the same thing with the caregiver, because I talk with a lot of veterans, and when I talk with veterans, they just start talking, living back in the glory days of the military. And it's like, no, I don't give a shit about that. I don't care what you did in the service. I don't care anything like that. I want to know about you right now. And what are you doing for yourself right now? It's like, great, we're all in the military. I get it. I understand it. But what are you doing right now to make yourself your own identity? And a lot of times they just sit there and scratch their own head. Well, I play video games. It's
No
like, okay,
bueno.
They
Get out and
don't
do
know.
something,
get
asshole.
out. Yeah, exactly. Get out and do something and figure it out. And it kind of goes the same thing with caregivers that I've talked to as well is, what's your identity look like? Well, and then they bring up, their spouse's name. And I'm like, nope, stop right there. What is it where's your identity at? And going through there. And that's where that I've come to realize you need to start living in parallel paths on what you have and not overlapping and not living for one another, because that's when things really, really start going downhill to where, you're on this journey of life together you're on your own separate paths, but they're intertwined. But at the same time, you're not, so creating that codependency on there. That's a big, big thing that I've noticed is codependency issues.
It is. And I think that, these caregivers, they do take that on unconsciously. So when they do realize that, oh, geez, I'm just a caregiver.
Well, you love them, so you want to do
You
it,
just do it,
Yeah, you just do it, and you
right?
don't recognize that you're doing it.
Yes, so it's no fault to the caregiver, but at the same time, programs and things that we do for the caregivers is getting them to realize that caregiving is a role. It is not your identity, and just like me and many other caregivers who have gone through this, my caregiving identity or role, if I had taken that on clear as an identity, it was about gone.
Yeah.
Right? In a split second, it was about gone. So what do I have afterwards? So yes, I stepped away from being a police officer. That job really wasn't conducive, but I found something else. I love advocating and supporting caregivers, right? We always need volunteers. And
Well, that was going to be my next question is what is your identity now? I mean, I
Right?
know you took on this huge role, and, I'm there with you when it comes down to, because now I feel like I'm a caregiver for a lot of veterans that come to us. And that's why we created the Veteran Navigator Network, is so somebody can have somebody that's out there that might not be like that. And that's a big thing that I talk about is, well, what's your identity? Where you want to go? And that's where it was really important for me with After Action Network was, let's make a buffet of just shit that you might be interested in. I don't care if it's yoga, or if it's painting, or if it's equine, if it's golfing, it's whatever. I really don't care what it is. Let's just figure out some things. So what is it that you guys do that, create your own identity and know the advocacy and all that? Because that's where my passion is as well too. I always told myself I was going to be an artist and I'm never going to sit behind a desk, and now all I do is sit behind a desk.
Right?
But I found passion within that. It's a reason for me to wake up in the morning and come do what I do. But that art is still a huge component of what I have. I'll still sit there and doodle. I'll still make my little sculptures or whatever else. But what is it that you guys kind of found that works for you?
Well, and I think, caregivers, so we can make excuses all day long, just like veterans can, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't have time. I can't do this because I'm taking care of my veteran. I can't leave my veteran because they may do this, and this. Okay, I went through that a little bit after my husband's attempt. I can't leave the house for fear of him attempting again. Well, I can't live my life like that, okay? And if he's going to do it, I may not be able to stop him. I cannot be with him 24/7 and live my own life as mentally and physically sound as I possibly can. That's debatable on days, but at the same time, I started school right after his attempt.
Mm-hmm.
My first thought was, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. And then my second thought was, you better, for yourself and your kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because it was about gone. And so many caregivers do get into this role of their whole livelihood is on the veteran. And when and if that veteran passes away, they have nothing. Okay, so we in our organization are huge on, yes, you can be a caregiver, but you have got to find something for yourself as well. And going ahead and getting, it's kind of twofold going to school for me and going and getting my master's degree. One, I wanted the education behind putting together appropriate programs and evidence-based programs for caregivers on the home front. Two, I needed something for me to fall back on if, heaven forbid, my husband wasn't here tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? Because I still have kids to support, I still have a mortgage to make, and I need to be able and ready to go out and do what I need to do to support myself and my kids. And you cannot get lost on, my veteran's always going to be there and they're always going to do this. And you talked about it, secondary traumatic stress, that's a real thing. It's a real diagnosis.
How does your kids handle all this? What is their perception of it?
So, it's so funny that you asked that. A couple of things. I can remember having to call my, so we have six kids together. My husband has 2 boys. I have 4 girls. We've never, most of them are old enough where we've never lived together. Okay. I have a 9-year-old, and then my next one is 23, and then all the rest are older than that. So, but my 23-year-old was living at home a couple of years ago when this happened. And I can remember I had to call her because, I'm not the one that drove my car home because I rode in the ambulance, and my husband sure didn't drive his car home. Our buddies ended up coming home with cars, so she's going, what is going on? So I had to call her and tell you, remember, this is a stepchild of his.
Yeah.
She wanted to immediately come down to the hospital. Immediately. That's how much my husband has made a huge impact in my kids' lives for good.
Yeah.
But she, I did not realize until probably 6 months ago how much that had caused her some really hard stress of not knowing what was going on, coming down to the hospital, and then really finding out what happened. And then, so we just came back from vacation, and we know PTSD can cognitively impair that person that has it. They can't concentrate as well at times. And my daughter has since moved away, and we went and visited her. And when my husband was out of the room, she goes, "Mom, he doesn't remember much at all."
Yeah.
And, I've been saying that for a long time. I see it every day. And for her to have not seen him in 6 months and notice that right away, my husband's 49. He's still young. That shouldn't be happening right now. And then I noticed last night as we're laying in bed, my 9-year-old's in there with us, and she is seeing his habits that are PTSD habits.
Yeah.
And she is seeing those now. So it is.
Is she a natural empath?
She is, right? Both those kids are, even a couple of years ago, my little one was reminding him to take his night meds. Right? And we didn't tell her to do that.
That's
she
cool.
just picks it up, which is neat. It is good. But we have got to remember that, you tell me, what organizations are supporting the kids out there of veterans?
No, I can't think of anything at the top of my head. But you bring up a good point too. Is even the kids start picking up on things that I can't do this because dad will do this or mom will do this or whatever else that's going through. But the problem is they get older, they don't understand why they were doing those things the entire time. Kind of goes back to that story of The son that I met that his father killed himself in front of it, he questioned himself for a long, long time. What should I have done different over this? And it's like, bro, you were 10 years old. There's nothing that you could have done. But then they're living in ambiguity their whole entire life on why should I do this? Actually, I pulled up on my phone. I remember reading this. There's actually a children's book called "Why Is Dad So Mad?"
We have that.
Yeah, you do. Okay, great. Yeah, yeah. And that's
Really?
yeah.
It is awesome book. I'm telling you, a few years ago, grabbed that and started reading through it with my daughter, so she would understand that, these are the reasons that he is getting mad. This is the reason that he can't go to your basketball game. This is the reason that he's not going to your school program, right? They know something's going on, and if you don't tell them, they make up their own stories, and those stories are farthest from the truth, and they're usually self-blaming.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. No. It's absolutely what it is, and that it still translates over to even the caregiver that's on there, of not fully understanding what's going on. Because I've come to find out, and especially with all the research that I've done over the years, the literature they put out there is so convoluted and so just like dumb it down for me. I mean, I really need somebody to just sit here and explain it. Okay, well, why am I just getting drunk and getting angry all the time? Like, why am I doing this and this? And where it comes back to it is, okay, well, great, I go see my therapist, and they're like, well, here's some more pills on whatever you need to take. And I'm like, that's not getting to where the root of the problem is. I mean, for me, was when I really started doing art, I was frustrated the hell out of my art instructors up at KCAI. It was because I come to realize that if I sit there and just, sit there and do the drawings, they're like, well, we want to see the schematics. We want to see all this. It's like, no, I just go in the steel shop and I start beating the shit out of metal, and I just start welding stuff together and cutting it apart. And then by the time it's done, I'm like, wow, I did not realize I just dumped so much trauma into one piece. But the cool thing is I was able to start talking about it, and it was really out of my head to where it was out of my control now. But then I can actually talk a little bit more instead of just one-on-one of just sitting down with my instructor and say, this is my traumatic experience and blah, 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 blah. I was like, no, I built it this way because of this. One sculpture that I did make was really kind of this rusted body that was like an Atlas type of figure of the weight of the world on my shoulders, and it was breaking down and rusting. When I got done with it, I never understood why I was gravitating to keep wanting to do that. And then I was like, damn, that's a lot of me in there of what's going through. So that's where I'm also a big believer on how do we come up with that with the caregivers and with the families out there to where they can start expressing themselves in that as way too. Because if once it's out in the world and you can actually step back from it and look at it, because it's easy, just like you said, for you to start making shit up in your head on why they're not doing that, or it's my fault, or it's whatever it's going through. It makes it a lot more easier to have those conversations, because a lot of times what's going on in your head isn't really the reality of what's going through. And this is something that I tell veterans all the time that are going through legal troubles or just going through issues. You're the only person that can make this worse right now. You are the only person that can make this worse. And so that's where it's just sometimes doing nothing is the best thing, but you really need to start taking those proactive steps in doing something. Because after a while, not doing anything, that's going to fester. It's going to cause a little bit more problems. So we need to start figuring out what is the best thing for you to start doing. Where can we get that? How do we involve your family into that? Is it something that to where, hey, you really fell in love with disc golf? Well, share that activity with your kids. Now you're having something that's fun. It's engaging. It's whatever else. Not like you're being forced to it. Not like you're kind of whatever else. It's really kind of finding those common bonding activities. And that's a lot of what we do here is how do we engage the community to have common bonding activities, whether it's playing pool or brewing beer or whatever it is. I don't care what it is, but that needs to be granular when it comes down to the family. What are you guys doing as a family unit to really kind of come together to understand what's going through? Because that's where, once again, the big thing that I've seen in the past is you understanding yourself exactly what's going through, because you don't understand why you're waking up angry and pissed off. You don't know why you're driving and you're flipping everybody off and doing all of that.
I do that now and I'm cool. I get pissed out there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean, and that's just the thing that, it's always a discussion point on what you need to do. And that's where we really need to figure out what are the best activities for you? And that's what's the best activities for the caregivers. Because this is kind of going back to the philosophy that I really love what you guys do is, what is it for you for the caregiver? I mean, that's the biggest thing is you need to step away. And this is something that when veterans come to me like, hey, I want to start a business or I want to start a nonprofit, I'm going to tell you the secret, what it is. And this sounds bad, but you can't care about the veteran. You have to care about taking care of your business or taking care of yourself. Because if you don't do that, you're going to kill your business or you're going to not kill your veteran, but it's going to go down that road because you're investing so much in that. So just by taking a few hours a day to really kind of focus on yourself, figure that out, you're going to be ultimately helping your veteran out more. And that positive energy that you're putting in yourself is going to get put back onto that veteran, and they're going to want to get better, and they're going to want to join. They're going to want to do that. So it's very easy to go down that slippery road of just saying, well, you know, this is all I'm doing. This is what my identity is. That's going to crush you. It's going to crush you in 2 seconds.
And I think the important thing is with the bonding is to bond with people who are going through the same stuff you are.
Yeah.
So at Caregivers on the Homefront, the caregivers, there is a bond between all of us. I mean, we have the same experiences, maybe not the exact same, but a lot of the same emotions we feel. It's the same. And so having that support is really just fundamental in what we do. And every month, at the beginning, I said that we were really trying to navigate how we connect with our caregivers during this pandemic. So we have been able to do that online. We are, last month we did a painting art class with them online where they were able to take just 2 hours to themselves, connect to people that they do have a bond with. Next week, we're doing a cooking class. We have a dietitian that will be joining us.
Well, that's what I
So
need.
we're making farmers market homemade salsa and chips. Next month, we're doing yoga together online.
Dude, I
So-
do yoga every day. I'm so into that.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so that's kind of our key thing is finding just different avenues and different things to connect our caregivers and give them an outlet. And then hopefully they, you know, a lot of them, when we do our painting, they realize that was really therapeutic for me. Just, you know,
Getting out of your mind.
just those strokes.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Is that
it's
why Bob
therapeutic.
Ross was so?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
happy little trees, baby.
hell yeah, he knows it on there. And you're bringing up really good points on really kind of finding that escape to getting out of your own mind and finding other communities to kind of be a part of what's going through there. That was a big thing knowing in my recovery and other veterans recovery stories that I know, was really just kind of finding that thing that's yours. Because what was it for me? So after I tried to take my own life in 2009, and then I went through the treatment facility program, I got introduced to a lot of weird shit. I mean, that's where I started picking up knitting. I started doing we did llama therapy, which
Llama?
yeah. I didn't talk about
Do
it.
they
I talked to this.
Do they spit
Yeah,
at
they're
you?
they're meaner than hell, but they're fun to play. It's fun to go do. So we played like llama soccer and a bunch of other activities with the llamas and all that. But
What?
yeah, oh yeah, it was weird. It was fun.
Llama
So,
soccer?
oh yeah,
Are
yeah.
you messing with me right now?
No, it was like a group of us, and so we had one llama out there, and you had to steer the llama into the pens, and so it's just like you're running around chasing this stupid fucking llama that's meaner than shit that spits on you and does
That sounds
whatever.
fun.
Oh no, it was a blast. But I really got introduced to a lot of weird stuff that I just started picking up on. I'm like, okay, well then I got out and I no longer had access to that. And I was like, well, I keep wanting to keep doing this weird stuff to see what I keep liking and finding. And that's what I would like to, introduce with the caregivers, introduce with the kids, introduce with the veterans of going through there. Let's figure it out what it is. Because I was big like yoga, that's not me, that's for hipsters. And I got into it. I'm like, okay, I really like this. This is fantastic.
It's really good.
Yeah. And so that's where I say challenge yourself to break outside of that, and that's a big thing that I've always tell veterans is break away from what you naturally do and make yourself uncomfortable. Because sometimes when you make yourself uncomfortable, it puts things in perspective for you, but then you never know. It could be like, wow, I really love this. I really love to cook, or I really love music, and now I'm going to just try picking it up, do whatever it is that you can do, and then make sure that you have something for yourself, make sure you have something for the family, and see where it goes. I mean, that's the best thing to do.
Question for you. Do you see a difference in the older and younger generation of spouses, or do you just come together as one?
So that's one of the things that I think has been a challenge for us,
Mhm.
and I think it's because of the systems. So the VA has a caregiver program, and only post 9/11 caregivers can qualify for a stipend. Um,
Wow.
Now, that's in the works of being changed right now. We do know things go slow, but
Yeah.
that is being changed. That program's being revamped to bring on other caregivers of different eras. But if you think about it, so caregivers that have been caring for a Vietnam era veteran for how long?
Yeah, right?
And then myself, as a post 9/11 caregiver, and have just met my husband 7 years ago, I've just been doing it for 7 years. But I get a stipend and they don't. So that's kind of that's wedged some animosity
For sure.
between these these different eras of caregivers. And for us, and then like I had said before, a lot of organizations only support post 9/11 caregivers. It's really hard for the older generation of caregivers to find help.
Vietnam still gets shit on.
Yes, well, and that's even Desert Storm too.
Oh,
Well,
right?
that's what,
think about
that's what I was
that.
going to say. Those are the two forgotten war generations
So,
of what we have was
yes.
that. I mean,
So, I mean, even Desert Storm doesn't qualify for post 9/11, and
It's the same battlefield.
exactly they served with my husband. My husband served with them, but yet my friend can't go to this organization, but I can. So that was one of the gaps that in Caregivers on the Homefront we support eras, caregivers of all eras, but it is still a challenge to meet them where they're at. We do it. It's so exciting for me when a caregiver registers with us, which is free. It just gives you an opportunity to learn about our programs more and be first to know about it. But when I see a Desert Storm era veteran caregiver or a Vietnam era, so that's what really our not focus, but we want to welcome all eras. We can learn so much from those caregivers who have been doing it for so much longer
Yeah.
than we have. And we want to give you a place that is welcoming to you. So, one of the programs that we have going on right now, I am an alumni Dole Caregiver Fellow with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, who does, they're really leading the way in advocacy and policy work for all eras of caregivers. And being a fellow for Missouri gave me the opportunity to get funding for a project that I wanted to do here in the state of Missouri. So I came up with an idea, and it really wasn't, I kind of took an idea that I saw on TV that, because seniors weren't able to graduate, they were putting lawn signs in the yards. I thought, whoa, that'd be
drive-by
really cool,
graduations.
right? I'm like, how awesome would that be to have a yard sign that says, I'm a veteran caregiver? Because most caregivers just are not seen.
Yeah.
Our community, and as much as Kansas City is coming around to
Well, they're forgotten about. I
Yeah.
mean, they're not forgotten about. They're just not looked at, or they're completely
don't-
overlooked.
Yeah. Well, when I come across people and really get to talking about this caregiving, especially in Kansas City, because we're not a military installation city. We have them on the peripheral, but we're not a military city, right? So you're not going to really understand or even know that there's veteran caregivers.
Yeah.
When I talk about it and educate someone, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just didn't know. So for our area, it's an advocacy piece. So what better way for us to reach more caregivers throughout the entire state of Missouri, give them a yard sign that says basically we see you, and so others see you, and then a box full of resources that you may not. Most of the people that are signing up for this, they could nominate themselves or a loved one could nominate them. And everyone that's being nominated is getting this. It wasn't a nominate myself and hope that I get picked.
Yeah,
It's
right.
everyone is being picked that nominates themselves. There are so many that have no idea, they've never heard about the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, which has a ton of resources, and then don't know about Caregivers on the Homefront, which is right here in their backyard, right? That's the big thing for us. We want to reach, I feel like we have a more national reach and not here in our backyard. Well, we live here. We live in your community. We want to support you. So with this navigator program, Natasha and I are getting ready to travel all throughout the state of Missouri and give these yard signs a care package. It's got some care package things in it as well as resources. And that's another thing that you have as a caregiver, as a family member. If you don't quite identify as a caregiver yet, but you're a family member of a veteran, there are a ton of resources out there. You just don't know about them, and we can help you.
Yeah, that's exactly why I started After Action Network too. And a lot of times with veterans and caregivers, they get so dependent on the VA as well too. That the VA should be helping us in this. No, they're not going to do shit, or you're going to be taking a long time of getting that paperwork done. They don't understand that there's really resources in your own backyard. Just because you're a veteran doesn't mean that you can't utilize civilian nonprofit services that are out there as well. Jay over at Street Medicine as well, and they work with a lot of homeless people out there. There's a large percentage of them that are veterans that are out there. And it just, once again, people don't realize there's a ton of resources out there available for you. That's what we're trying to do, is help you guys navigate and have you guys part of the Navigator network and the technology systems that we use. But where's the big thing that, I feel like we're kind of on the same boat on a few different things. But to me, it seems like one of the biggest barriers that you're facing right now is awareness on what's going on. I mean, to me, like, honestly, it wasn't even a thought until I met you about caregivers, to be honest. And it was just like, oh shit. And then really starting to talk to you, I'm like, oh shit, this is a problem. Like, it's just the same thing with women veterans and minority veterans. It's just, there's not really shit out there for you to connect to or be a part of that community to go through there. So now it's really easy to get lost of not knowing of what to do. So that's where, to me, where are those other barriers that you're seeing? Because obviously awareness is a huge, huge issue of what's going through. But it also seems like the VA is not really kind of stepping up to where they're understanding the true problems of what's going on. And it also seems like funding is a big issue.
Yes. So I do, as much as when I first started this, we did have those roadblocks at the VA. I would sit there and go, hey, the caregiver program at the Kansas City VA and Topeka, Leavenworth, Eastern VA system. I'm like, hey, we do this right in, the backyard. Can you share our resources? And at the time, the VA really was, you had to jump through some hoops to get your resources shared. That is changing. I have seen some really good change. We actually have great partnerships with the Topeka VA program, the caregiver program, and here at Kansas City caregiver program. So we have spoke at their mental health summits. We've been there for some of their caregiver recognition workshops that they've done, and they call us now. So I do believe that is changing, and that change is good. Here's what I believe that our community here in Kansas City is not doing, and this is an advocacy piece and it's an education piece, right? When you think veteran, and I believe Kansas City does a really well job of supporting veterans, you have got to think family too. That's got to be in the same word, your same thought, and go, okay, if this organization doesn't support or just supports the veteran, who supports the family member? What resources can I give this veteran for their family? And that is a couple of things. You've got to talk up more, right? We have huge corporations in Kansas City. Do you know who the veterans are in your employment? Do you know who the family members are?
Exactly. Yeah.
They don't.
They don't.
They
Yeah.
don't. If they do have a veteran like committee or workplace group, you're not making it family friendly by just calling it a veteran resource
Service
employment
group,
group.
yeah.
All right. And so that's where we have got to educate people more. Then we find more caregivers.
Yeah.
Right. So it can't, Natasha and I do as much as we possibly can getting out and about and putting our materials out there. But it's going to take more than just two people beating the ground of trying to reach caregivers.
And
No.
I think too, there's a gap in our community, but communities all over, of providers not being competent with military families and veteran caregivers, veteran families. So a lot of our advocacy comes from wanting to share those competencies and educate providers on what military families, why they look different, and what to expect from military families, veteran families.
That's something that I actually talk about. When I go and talk to big groups that have, large veteran service groups within their organization is, they're focused about supporting the veteran while they're at work. When I'm like, you're doing this wrong. You need to support them while they're at home because now they're going to be a better employee because they got a better home life of what's going through. That's where I'm a very, very big advocate is you need to be supporting them outside of work. They're going to come in and do the job. They're going to be damn good at their job. But if you're not supporting them outside of work, that's when that starts translating back to the workplace on what you have going through. That's where I always say, hey, give them 1 or 2 hours off a week to either come down with us and do an activity or let them go play disc golf or let them go do whatever that it may be. That's going to make them a better employee when they come back because, they might go home and kick the dog or, whatever that is, because they just don't know that. But, hey, we're going to support you at work. But, as soon as you clock out, good luck to you. That's where the issues that I've seen.
What does that
coming up
mean?
there.
Support you at work.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. If you're there to do a job, do the damn job.
Yeah.
And I don't want somebody over here coddling me like, oh, you poor veteran.
No, that's exactly
I hate
it.
that shit.
No, I'm right there with you. And that's where it kind of comes back. And this is what I was actually going to bring up was I'm really kind of sick of that, hey, thank you for your service thing. Like, don't thank me for my service. I knew what I was doing and I knew what I was signing up for. One thing is like you should be saying thank you for your service to caregivers because that's a service.
Yeah.
You're doing something to serve veterans. That's what it is. And that's where I tell communities that I'm talking with on this is like, hey, I should be thanking you for your service to veterans. What we did is what we did. We knew what we were signing up for. We knew what was going through and everything else. But by you stepping up and you helping veterans, you helping the caregivers out, you helping the families, that's a service. Thank you for your service to our veterans. And that's the culture that we need to get into because there's too many times that we sit here as a community and we just say, hey, thank you for your service. Hey, I told a veteran, thank you for their service. I feel good about myself. Fuck you. That does nothing for me. It does absolutely nothing for me besides feel awkward.
BAH is not a paycheck.
No.
And it's seriously, if you're married to a veteran, you need to get compensated for it's a job.
Yeah, and it's being that's being talked about. Thankfully, those things are being talked about in in policy making, which is a good thing. But when you said supporting veterans at work, here's a big thing. You need to support the caregivers of veterans at work.
Yeah.
Because if they need time off to go to an appointment with their veteran, they need that time off and they need to be supported. If you, just like I had said, if I go in and tell my supervisor, hey, I need to go home now, don't question me. Know that I have a veteran that I'm taking care of. And if I tell you that I need to go home now, don't give me 20 questions and make me feel like crap that I do need to go home. And so
I'm right there with
That's
you.
a good point.
I'm done with kind of like the lip service that businesses give. Oh, we hire veterans. No, you don't. You bring them in to do interviews and do all that other type of stuff. Statistically, people really they're not hiring veterans as much as they like.
Don't they get a tax break?
No,
Or is that crap?
there's little certificates and stuff that they get for hiring it, which is looks good for them, but at the same time is who in their right mind is going to hire a veteran that's disabled or whatever else, or a caregiver that has to miss 20 hours a week because you have to take them to physical therapy, you have to take them to their therapist, you have to do that. Well, now you're just creating something else to where now your boss is like, well, why are you gone all the time? Well, you should recognize of what I'm trying to do to help this veteran out. Once again, that goes back, that's a service that I'm doing that we as a community need to step up. I mean, the VA can only go as far as we can. And this is where I say, quit saying thank you for your service and actually do something. Do something that's going through there. Be a little bit more understanding of, yes, they need some more time off to take them to physical therapy or do whatever else. Because I know in my experience with veterans that do go to this company, they make up those hours. They'll sit there and say, hey, thank you for letting me do this. I'm going to tack on another 2 hours, when I go home and go to work or do whatever else. There's something of that military mindset that not just veterans have, but the caregivers do as well, because they know the life, they know the lifestyle of what's going through. So that's where I always say, and I'm a big believer in policy change of, hey, let the VA heal the bones and do all that other stuff. When it comes down to, stuff like this, we need to step up as a community to do this, not just veteran service organizations, not just other nonprofits, but businesses out there that say that they help veterans and they want to help veterans. You need to step up and actually do something. Oh, we're hiring 10,000 veterans. Great, you're hiring 10,000 veterans, but what are you doing to make them better employees and to set them up for success? That's a huge problem that I see, and that translates back over, actually even worse when it comes down to caregivers and spouses. I spouted off that statistic earlier, 70% of spouses are unemployed. Why? Because they got to sit there, take their veteran to the hospital. They got to go to these appointments. Then they're barely living off their veteran's disability. You have a couple kids and you're married, you're only making $3,000 a month off that. Good luck. Now you paid the bills, you paid the mortgage, and you put food on the table. Now you're just sitting at home all day. Hey, you know who the best people in the world is for when the lockdown happened and stay-at-home orders? Veterans and their caregivers. They know what's up.
We had that down way before it was a cool thing. But talking about hiring veterans, so one of the things that I see when I see veteran hiring fairs, I'm like, yeah, my husband can't work, but I need a job. But nowhere does it say this is for veteran and family members. And you may think in your mind going, well, we mean family members too. You have got to say it, because for military and veteran families, there was a huge difference in when you were in the military, what services were for the military service member and what was for the families, what they went to, what they could go to, what they couldn't. Same with veterans. There are some organizations that do not support the family members. So you have to say it. You want them to feel welcome. Don't just assume that the family members are going to come to your veteran job fair. But for a lot of us, our veterans can't work. But I can guarantee you the caregiver, the spouse, may need to work. But give them the tools so that they can work successfully. And now that, the pandemic, lots of people are working from home.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, so you realize now that a lot of your positions can be work from home. Those jobs need to be going to some of these veteran caregivers. They want to work, they need to work, and they would love work from home jobs.
Absolutely. And so that brings up a really good point, because one thing that I always do when I go do my talks and everything else, what I talk about is, what are the two things that you say you served in this country? You either served in prison or you served in the military. And then especially when you served in the military and you have a family when you're in the military, even the spouses become institutionalized. And that's a huge, huge problem, or that's why there's such a problem, is when you come back out into the reality of really what it is. You get away from the structure of what you had. Okay, well, when you were, at home, you had on-base housing, you had free childcare, you had, the wives club, you had everything else that's going through, or the spouses club, whatever that may be. Now, when that veteran gets out and they're no longer able to work, and then now that caregiver has to pick it up, well, guess what? Where do you go find daycare services? How much does that cost? And then people come back and like, holy shit, daycare costed that much of what's going through. Then what skills did I come out of the military to get a job, to do something like that? And so that's where those roles kind of flip of, hey, goes back to I'm the breadwinner when there's in the military, and then come out of it, those roles flip. And that's a very, very hard flip to be able to accomplish and actually go through. And so that's where, once again, I'm a very big believer on really kind of taking a year, once you first get out of being supported for a year to actually make that transition successfully. Because, day one you get out, where are you going to go? Do you have a house set up for when you're doing this? Do you have childcare set up for this? Do you have job interviews set up? Oh, hell no. So you're going through the next 3 months of trying to figure that out. Bills start adding up, debt starts happening. And that's where, that's when a lot of those exacerbating symptoms of PTS, of anxiety start coming into play. And that's where that worthless feeling of, well, I was taking care of my family when I was in. Now that I'm out and I'm broken and I can't really be that fully developed person in the civilian world. Well, that's where a lot of that shame comes in through, and that's a lot of shame that goes along with that. And that's where it's really, really hard to wrap your head around. And that's where it's very easy because, we're taught our whole entire lives how to build a life for ourselves. That's what our parents do. That's what you guys do with your kids. And that's exactly the way it should be. Then you get in the military and it's like, nope, get rid of all that shit. You're a fucking killer now. You get knife handed and da-da-da-da and all this. And so you really form these destructive habits out. And so when you get out of the military and you have these destructive habits, where are you going to point that gun? You're going to point it in the mirror. You're going to point it at yourself and really kind of know where else that has to go through that, or it's going to be the closest people around you. So once again, it's how do we build up that tool set to where we can start teaching positive constructive outlets when they get going out, because it's not just for the veteran that needs it. Yes, it does. That has issues with it. But that caregiver is going to be taking on a whole entire another role when they coming back. And that's a huge thing because now you're going to be the breadwinner. You're going to be everything else that's meaningful in that relationship while you're supporting that veteran. Well, you're taking on 3 full-time jobs. And you're absolutely right. There definitely needs to be a lot more awareness of what's going on.
What are some wins recently that you've had?
I think with our restorative weekends, some of those wins that come out of there are when we talked about, who you are, what your identity is. One of our caregivers had been a nurse and had to leave her employment, a job that she loved, to take care of her husband. And she, after the restorative weekend, went home and found a nursing job that worked for her so that she could be that nurse that she loved as well as take care of her veteran. And
That's perfect.
I mean, it really was, because she thought that this career that she loved was no longer going to be something that she could do. Does it look different? Yes. But she found somebody, an employer that would work with her where she could still be that person she wanted to be.
That's fantastic.
And then another win for us was a caregiver. So it's really difficult for these caregivers to get to these weekends. Okay.
Yeah, will you actually get into the weekends a little bit? Like describe kind of how it all plays out and all that?
Sure. So you do have to apply for the weekend. We want to make sure that your expectations are something that we can meet. Because this is a different weekend than what many caregivers are used to if they've heard about caregiver retreats. So we want to make sure that they're ready to come in and work on themselves. So we do have that application period. These weekends are free for the caregiver. We either give them a stipend to drive here, or we fly them here. They come in on a Friday. Our programming starts Friday night. We do not end our programming until late Sunday night, and then they leave on Monday. So getting there, especially, we actually do end up reaching caregivers that have never gone to anything like this before. So it is kind of neat that we are reaching caregivers that have never had support. So you've got to think about it. They're used to taking care of their veteran, and they don't leave the house very much. And then they may have children that they don't leave with the veteran very much because the veteran may need care and they can't leave. So if we can just get them on the plane or started in the car, that is a win for us, getting them there. So they want to come, but they just start mulling a lot of things through their minds. So they need a lot of help when they make the decision to come to these weekends. And then, so they're so used to talking about their veteran that they get really nervous when we tell them that, hey, Friday night, we want to know who you are and who you're caring for. You can tell us that, but tomorrow morning, like Natasha had said, you're going to come in here and you're going to talk about you. We have had caregivers come up to us and go, I don't know that I can do that. I don't know who I am. This really scares me. And that just tells you how much they lose their own identity. But so one of our caregivers that started talking about herself had gone through 3 different attempts with her husband. She had never told anybody about it. I am here to tell you, you cannot stuff that stuff down and think that it's not going to come back up and bite you in the ass at some point in time. And you are not going to be that great caregiver for your veteran, and you're not going to be that great mom or dad or sister or brother or parent for that veteran. You have got to find an outlet, and we hope that we are giving these caregivers outlets. But she went home from our weekend. She had a tribe, we call our cohorts tribes at the end of the weekend, that she can lean on. A couple of weeks later, her husband attempted suicide. They had been together for over 20 years. And he did all the finances, everything was in his name. And what happened, his meds had been switched. And he had really a psychotic breakdown, attempted suicide, ended up going to a civilian hospital, and in his mind, he totally put her over to the side, cut off all financial means to her, and she told us that had it not been for us, that she had to call, and it wasn't just myself. We have a team. We have some volunteers that are counselors as well. And she kind of tag team each of us. And at one point in time, I actually thought, well, she was going down that route of thinking about suicide. And at one point in time, we actually did a welfare check. She lived out of state, which was extremely hard for us because I wanted to jump in the car and go,
Yeah.
"You're okay.
I know that one.
We've got you. We're right alongside with you." But she did say, thankfully, it was a nice looking officer that came to her door. She knew that we had sent them, but she told us that had she not been at that restorative weekend just a few weeks earlier, that she wouldn't have made it through that time. So that's a win for us in that you cannot do this journey alone. You have got to find other caregivers that understand these things, that when you tell them or when you say, I'm not doing well, I don't know if I can go on, and and what to do with that. You've got to know what to do with that. So that was another win for us. When we did do our paint virtual paint night, we invited all caregivers from each one of our restorative weekends, and we had them all introduce themselves because they not all knew each other and where they were from. And at the end of that, a couple of them had been messaging each other privately through the chat. They lived like 30 minutes away and didn't even know each other.
That's good.
So they have a new support group right in their backyard. So that's the things that we want to do for caregivers.
Yeah,
That is a win.
well, and that goes back to the crazy thing for me is that it goes back that caregivers don't even realize they're caregivers. And they don't
No.
even know that there's caregivers right there on the other side,
Nope.
and that's where it's, and that's what I really like as well too, because, even in this sense, even though that you're meeting caregivers of veterans with other caregivers of veterans, but you still have similar relatable experience for caregivers that aren't veterans as well too, that you can start talking
Yes.
about that, and that breaks you kind of away from that veteran aspect. Because that's a big thing for me as well too, is breaking veterans away from actual veteran things. You need to start going out in the community. You need to start finding more common bonding activities with people that aren't veterans, because that's the only way you can really kind of fully reintegrate back into society. But what you're doing is also giving them tools to make it more comfortable to go talk with their civilian peers on the same subject. Because you never know. Once again, they might have the same exact experience with somebody that's not a veteran, and then you're just kind of branching out. So I really love being able to have those tool sets that you guys are teaching to these people on, hey, it's okay to go out there and see it. I think the big thing that you guys do too is helping people accept the fact that they're caregivers. That's a huge thing for
It
me. I
is.
mean, just like alcoholics and drug addicts, you need to take that a step of understanding that you are a caregiver and accepting the fact that you're a caregiver and that you're willing to take that extra step for the person that you are caring for. And so once again, thank you for your service on that aspect.
Well, and Joey, I think that's really important too. In what you said, the caregiver needs to, you know, be able to recognize that they're a caregiver, but the veteran also needs to let that spouse or family member recognize themselves as a caregiver.
Absolutely.
It is not it's not dishonorable towards the veteran. It actually opens up a lot of things for your loved one, for the veteran's loved one, by being able to make it okay that they can identify as a caregiver.
I completely 100% agree with you. There needs to be that dialogue between the caregiver and the veteran of, hey, do you understand the things that I'm doing for you?
Yes.
I mean, I'm going to the grocery store, I'm working the job, I'm doing all this. Do you fully understand that? Because it's very easy for that to be, I want to say, taken advantage of. That's not really kind of not the right word on what I'm talking about, but it's very easy just to say, this is what you should have been doing. It's like,
Right.
no, I'm really going, I'm really carrying the weight of this
Yes.
marriage or this relationship or whatever that is going through, but really having that dialogue of, hey, and it goes back to, what I was saying earlier, you being able to take care of yourself is going to be able to help take care of that veteran. And
Yes.
that's actually going to propel the veteran to actually want to get better, to want to go more, as they see you out there doing it. Well, I want to be a part of the fun club. That's
Exactly.
where I want to jump on this train and do it, so we can get it that way. So before we wrap things up on here, what are some things that you guys need as a community? I know funding is always a big thing, more awareness, but is there anything in particular that you guys need and get out there that we can, tell the listeners on what we have?
I would say definitely funding,
Yeah.
but we're working on that every day. Also, just you know, we will be providing caregivers on the home front is expanding. We saw the gap with organizations and mental health providers that provide therapy to veterans and veteran caregivers. We saw that gap. We saw that there's some providers just aren't competent in that area. So we will be starting out with soon providing therapy to our veteran caregivers and the whole family.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Where can everybody find you guys at?
Yes. So we have a website, www.caregivers-homefront.org. Google Caregivers on the Homefront. It's going to come up. We have a Facebook page. We're active on social media. Again, if you don't remember that, you can just Google Caregivers on the Homefront. We will come up. I think we need that awareness of our community. Help us go the extra mile and not only support the veteran, but support that entire family unit, so that we can really decrease these suicides, decrease divorce rates, and decrease homelessness. We are in a reactive mode right now. Let's get back to being preventative, and so we're not having to put so much into being reactive. And I think that's what starts with Caregivers on the Home Front, and making sure that the family member is supported in their mental health as well. And like Natasha said, our mental health services are not only for the family member slash caregiver, it's for their kids. And we are going to put an emphasis on veteran couples as well. We don't think that that gets enough. There's not enough help out there with that, and not enough knowledge. But so our services, when we have grant funding, which we do right now, we're going to be able to offer so many free services, and then we will always be low cost. So you're not going to look us up and go, oh my gosh, I can't afford to come. to a therapy appointment for caregivers on the home front. This is our main goal. The mental health of our family members are extremely important, and we truly believe when the entire family unit is supported, and that may be separately, maybe the veteran is going to the VA or getting their care elsewhere, the families have to have a place to go to. And if they're being taken care of as well, then we truly believe that family members, these family members are going to stick together and they're going to thrive instead of meet another end.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the old expression? Happy wife, happy life.
Yep.
Going
Hey,
through there. Exactly.
You can take that through from the military. It's still true today.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and this is what we're going to ask everybody that's out there listening and watching on there. We need to take proactive steps. So be
Yeah.
proactive in helping us out, helping caregivers on the home front out. By you being proactive in helping us out with getting more programs and things off the ground for caregivers, we're not such in a reactive state, that we're not just dealing with veterans in crisis, that we're actually taking a proactive stance to where we are not having to deal with those crisis issues, that we're not having to be a reactive measure, but we're really going out there and being proactive about it.
Ask questions, ask a lot of questions, and learn, educate yourself, guys. So,
Yes.
Yeah. So once again, I want to thank you both for coming down here and talking to us about caregivers on the home front. I'm excited to see what you guys do. I love working with you guys. It's fantastic I learn something new every day. And this is, what this is about. And what we do here with After Action Studios is learning more about what's out there and what's available. So if you're a caregiver out there listening, please reach out, caregiversonthehomefront.org. We'll have it up on the website. Once again, we could always use your continuing support for what we do here and what they do. So once again, follow us on Facebook, check us out on YouTube, and thank you all for listening. Oh, I forgot one thing. We do have a tradition now that we have is coming in for this, you got us on the table.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I know.
Yeah.
So,
Love it.
all
We'll have
right,
this whole thing filled.
ladies,
with
thank
love.
you so much.
it.
It
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure. It was
Thank you
fun.
so
Thank
much.
you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.